But enough about plot, let's talk about explosions for a second. Specifically, something that fandom has dubbed Kalish splosions, though many have said it should be Koichi splosions, since Koichi Sakamoto is the stunt and action director most likely responsible, though I'm going to stay with Kalish splosions because he was the man with final say in the matter. This may seem like an odd thing to bring up, but it's relevant to how things are different in this era. The explosions are not handled well, and this trend started at the tail end of Dino Thunder. Power Rangers has always had explosions in it. However, there's a distinct difference in the way they're presented. Going by, say, Mighty Morphin, explosions have been quick. Sparks and blasts, usually small ones, happen all around the Rangers and they get knocked away, or they just manage to avoid getting hit by a blast. However, I started to notice that the explosions a few times in Dino Thunder, and much more times in SPD, were mostly behind the Rangers, and the directors decided that the explosion once isn't enough to convince us it's cool. Instead, they zoom in closer, slow down the same explosion, and have it happen again. The repeating slow zoom is irritating because it makes it seem like the audience's attention can't be focused on multiple elements. It needs to linger on it to get the full impact. Except that we don't need to see the full impact. It's an explosion. We get it. However, the real crime is the back explosions. Now, when they're on motorcycles or driving a vehicle, it makes sense that the explosions are behind them since they're just driving past them. Most of the time. Unfortunately, when this keeps happening, it makes the enemies look like they can't aim for crap. This is especially bad when they're not on vehicles. When an explosion occurs in front of the Rangers or a monster, it gives the illusion that it's much closer to them than it actually is. Those front explosions also tend to be pretty small explosions, but quick enough that you can believe that they were hit by the blast. However, Kalish explosions are huge, but happening behind the team, so either they should be vaporized by the sheer tonnage of it, or they're so far away that it shouldn't affect them. But again, the problem is when the explosions happen behind them, it looks like the enemy missed. But the Rangers leap into the air, flailing their arms, and then fall down anyway. It doesn't make the villain look strong. It makes the Rangers look like wusses because the wind is blowing them over. It gets especially ridiculous when sometimes the villain will have the back explosion, but all it's doing is sending them straight up into the air. It isn't badass, it's just stupid. The slow motion makes it seem like we're supposed to focus on how awesome this is, how impressive this is. But it isn't. It's just boring. Otherwise exciting fight scenes are ruined by this, especially since they keep on doing it. It'll happen multiple times in the same fight, and they're only saved because occasionally we do see a few front explosions and real impacts, but they're few and far between. Hell, with the amount of times they do the background explosions in a single fight, you might as well just film the entire damn thing in front of a green screen if you're not gonna bother making it look like the explosions are actually having a real impact on them. And on a show like Power Rangers, which is 75% fight scenes anyway, when you make the fights boring, it really makes the experience unbearable and you just want to skip through it. Now, why is this in any way significant to the actual series? Because it shows how the fighting quality has changed for the worse. In the original days, it was about martial arts techniques. All of the Rangers were skilled fighters, and the fighting was subsequently more impressive because it was being done through actual martial arts. However, as time went on, they started adding more wireworks into the fighting to compensate for the lack of abilities by the actors, who didn't have the training that the original actors did. That I didn't actually object to, since it was still fighting, and hey, they are superheroes after all. I can believe them doing, like, really high jumps and whatnot. But I'm putting my foot down here because the explosions, and subsequently a more extensive use of special effects, is a terrible thing to do. It's the equivalent of a movie compensating for its lack of story with special effects. Yeah, I like when the Rangers use their guns, but it's not because the gun effects are flashy, it's because guns are a more efficient way of defeating the enemy. In the end, though, the martial arts are a staple of the show, and I don't want to trade them in for big, repeated, slow-motion explosions in a rock quarry.